We're live.
Good morning. So this is the continued meeting of the Renewable Energy Standard Reform Working Group. And today is Wednesday, December 13th, 2020. We went on break with discussion underway. So let me turn to my co-chair and we'll tag team wrestle this, come to the committee with a proposal.
So first of all, thank you all for the great discussion and the hard work and the digging in. This has actually been a great process. And our place we're in today, I think, is reflective of the complexity of it and the fact that we're still in process and its session hasn't started. So we are, after the conversation prior to the break, thinking that the best course of action would be for what's currently labeled proposed legislation in this report to move to an appendix that would not be part of what we agreed to today, and that the topics that were brought up around, like things that were talked about during our process but may not be in this report, should also be submitted by those of you who have observed them, and they will go in the appendix. Folks who have issues that you've certainly brought up a number of times about net metering, for example, I think you should make sure those are captured in the appendix as well. And then, so what we're proposing right now is to say then we would be able to vote on this report. Mostly, I think there may be some concerns Senator Briano just brought up. We want to sync up what we call this legislation that's in here. I actually think it should be as close to, exactly what it is. Like Representative Sebelius said it well in our little step out moment. She said, it is Legislative Council's best attempt to put together the beginning of a framework for legislation. So that's a lot of words, but I think that matters because we're into those details at this point. So calling it that, putting it in the appendix, and then acknowledging the fact that there's still work to do that's where we're at right in this moment. Folks have thoughts on that? Do you want to fill out anything?
Well, yeah, just that it's, everyone's familiar with the legislative process. You start with the first working draft, and then that precipitates a lot. There's nothing like having something in black and white between the four corners of a page to get people to focus and bring more information forward. So it's great that we have a working draft. We put it in the appendix for it. We can sort of jumpstart the legislative process. The verbose version of it, I was thinking, was something like, working draft for further development through the legislative process to say we're happy, we're appreciative of Ledge Council capturing what she heard in our discussions. And today makes it abundantly clear that there's more work to do. And I think we also discussed we would like to ask if those who are actively having discussions will be willing to commit to continuing those discussions so that the legislative process, the legislative session, which is only a couple of weeks off, that your good work continue and it be ready to be brought forward in just a different venue. So let me pause on that question. Can anyone say if they're willing to continue to work outside of this process to prepare for the legislative counterpart to this?
Yes. And to capture those nuances that I identified.
Right.
Great.
And then
I'm seeing a lot of nods.
Yeah.
Is anyone not willing to continue?
And then as Rep. Sheldon just said, so I heard about one size doesn't fit all, net metering concerns, DUs who are already at 100%, ramping rates, what types of resources are eligible for Tier 1A, et cetera, inclusion and exclusion of resources. So those are all great remarks. And if those who have been thinking about those things would contribute them for the appendix, then we'll capture that as well. And you'll be able to express it better than we can hear it and try to reflect it in the report ourselves. On
Wonderful, thank you, co-chairs. I would just further refine, we might want to mention in the report about, or with the legislation, that the committee really did not have time to consider it in any kind of meaningful way. So just to further clarify that it was our Ledge Council's best interpretation of the conversation, and the committee was unable to really vet the specific language, but we're including it as part of the work that was done. Yes.
Yeah,
In the
I want to
appendix.
appreciate what Ledge Council has done.
Yes.
It's very hard to write based on listening to a group discussion.
Yeah.
But it seems like in this building, I've noticed that no one likes to write, but everyone likes to edit. So I very much appreciate that she's got that started, and it will be helpful.
Okay. I see there's a comment, William, but I'm just going to hold it for a minute. Your proposal, in short, the proposed legislative council's best attempt at beginning working draft, Appendix 3. The topics that might be missing from the report, proposals that you're working on the outside, that they be submitted to Appendix 3. Any working group member, that invitation is open to you through Monday.
Close of business Monday, which is the 18th.
And to acknowledge in this report that there is still work to do, and this is a conversation still actively in process. Is that your proposal?
That would be in the introduction, I think.
It can be in the introduction or in the discussion. Are you considering that the discussion segment of this report also get moved to the appendix?
Oh, well,
Of the draft legislation,
Of the draft report of this working group?
draft report.
So the draft report that we've been looking at has several different components to it. Starting on page 16, there's the proposed legislation.
Yeah.
You'd like to move to the appendix 3. And discussion of the proposed legislation begins on page 17. Are you also proposing that move to the appendix? Yes.
I would think so, because it's referring right back to what we
Yep.
just read. So they go hand in glove.
Okay. And your proposal means that the rest of this draft report stay as is? You're asking?
We, just looking at, if we assume we're going to go that route, there will be some cross references that will change. For instance, I'm looking on page 5, the second paragraph under the heading duties. It says specific recommendations related to this task can be found in more detail in the section of this report that describes the working group's proposed legislation. Mm-hmm. So, I would want to amend that in 2 ways. One, instead of saying specific recommendations, I would say specific considerations, because we didn't land on them as a recommendation. Yeah. And that we just, anytime we refer to proposed legislation, that we use the label of how it's going to be labeled in the appendix so that the cross-referencing syncs up everywhere.
Yep, okay.
I don't know if other people have other sort of catches to point out. Anyone like that?
Did you want to open the floor to that question?
I thought it was important to acknowledge in the introduction to the report that this was an ongoing process that was time constrained. That we did, what we could do with 8 meetings.
And you want to add that to the introduction of the draft report?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Acknowledge that there's still work to do and time was constrained as far as the working group got. Okay?
May I further suggest a refinement to Chair Sheldon's comments in the group is voting for this has committed to that work.
Yes, good. Good.
So the group that has contributed to this body of work is committed to this work, going forward. Yeah. Okay. Co-chairs, what kind of acknowledgement do you need from the group around those suggestions? Are you looking for reservations, approval, feedback?
Do folks have concerns? Or looks like there's 3 hands up on the screen. Folks in the room have concerns with that? No, no, on the screen.
Let's clarify this for a minute. I'm going to take the folks who have their hands raised on the screen, William, Ken, and Darren. We'll come back to those comments in just a minute. Would you mind putting your hands down for a moment?
Sure.
Rebecca did need to leave. I'm not saying that you can't raise your comment, just for clarity. Do you have any reservations around the proposal that the co-chairs have offered? If so, anyone who has reservations, could you raise your hand? It's the same 3 people. Okay, you can put your hands down. We'll go in order. Then William, then Ken, then Darren.
So this applies somewhat to the legislative language, but especially to any additional appendices. There are a couple of different topics that were raised that people might submit. It's just kind of what's the difference between appendices and the member comments that are supplemental. You know, I think appendices kind of are associated with the sort of an official part of the consensus part of the report. So I don't know if it's a question of clarifying the distinction there or going with what Laura suggested for the legislative language, which I would support, is these appendices would at least have to be put into context if they're simply thoughts or recommendations from certain members, but not really a consensus report.
So procedurally, I'm going to say my understanding, please correct me if I don't have this accurately, that you're asking for comments to be submitted for Appendix 3, and that will be like a collated set of comments. So William, to your point, it can be labeled as these are comments that came in after the working group closed. They include additional proposals, additional thoughts. They haven't been vetted by the group. And it is one appendix, Appendix 3, that includes all those different thoughts.
And the legislation? I think that's confusing. Wouldn't it?
Legislation would be a separate appendix.
A separate, okay, but you said 3 both times, so 3 and 4.
Yeah.
That's fine.
So a new section 4 with
Yeah.
the working draft, whatever.
Okay.
How it's referred
Great.
to.
Yep, that makes sense. So the topics now end up being in Appendix 4. William, thank you. Who is up next? Ken, I think.
Yeah, very briefly, I'm just going to raise again the first full sentence on the top of page 18. I do not believe correctly reflects where the discussion ended. And that is a significant enough issue for us that it will cause me to not support the report. I prefer that sentence removed from the final document.
Can you say again what you're referring to, please?
Top of page 18, first full sentence. The working group considered whether to change the definition of what resources qualify for Tier 2 and decided not to recommend any changes at this time. I remember us taking a vote around Tier 1. I specifically mentioned in pretty much every meeting that we would prefer to have hydro included in Tier 2, and I do not believe that issue was ever brought to a vote or resolution. So I'd prefer no reference to it rather than stating that we landed in a particular place.
Jen, I'm sorry, Representative William.
What's your comment?
I was just going to add to that we had also previously raised that no new wood biomass electricity generation would be eligible for Tier 2, that it would apply across the board. And so though for a somewhat different reason than Ken, I would agree. And also, generally the sort of low impact hydro, I think that Ken is referring to is something that I agree with is part of the conversation.
So here's where that piece, some of this is contained in the straw poll notes and some of them are not. And I think what you're looking for is just a real clear language in the discussion about what actually took place. So if there wasn't a vote, then to omit that phrase in the discussion is a suggestion. If you look in the straw poll votes and those kinds of considerations under Tier 2 definition, for example, aren't reflected there because most of that discussion was under Tier 1, that would be something that I'm guessing would go into the appendix, now Appendix 3.
So looking at what we've included here for straw poll,
Yeah.
there is in fact not a vote.
Not a vote on Tier 2,
On definitions.
or Tier 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Do any people have comments on removing that sentence or agree that it should be removed?
Yeah, I think it doesn't accurately reflect the conversation that took place the week before.
So maybe one thing we can do with what council is revisit the discussion and the discussion of the sample bill or whatever it's called. And double check that any assertion in here is actually one of the things. If we say it's a recommendation, but if we didn't vote it, we should exclude it.
So that's just one specific edit. We have one more comment online. Go ahead, Darren, I think it's you.
Thank you. It's partly a clarification before we move forward. I think Co-Chair Bray had a list of items that were discussed but are not covered in the legislation. And I'm wondering, and this would help me in being able to support the broader report, if the appendix that includes the legislation could at least make reference to those issues specifically, because at least one or two of them were issues that we care about quite a bit. And I think there were others Peter mentioned and Lewis mentioned. So I'm just wondering if that list could be included as items that were discussed but were not yet reflected in the draft legislation. That would be really helpful.
Do you see them reflected in the straw poll discussion but notes?
Not entirely. And I think placing that list in the appendix with the legislation would be helpful for any future reader to know that these were issues that we flagged but that we hadn't resolved yet. Would give me comfort in voting for the broader package as at least for BED.
So these are ambiguities around, for example, the uniqueness of utilities needing time to develop how tiers 1, 1A, and 2 interact, ambiguity about moving hydropower into tier 2, and discussions about net metering.
Well, and I think he had a few others, including exemptions that apply to 100% renewable utilities, basing some of those requirements on load growth as opposed to tier 1A. I think if that can be included along with those other elements as just a couple sentences even of the legislative appendix, that would be really helpful for us.
I think I'd asked that you all submit those so that they're in your words. The one that if you brought them up, I guess we could make our best effort to write 4 sentences, but that's where we left it.
So I think to really make your request clear, the really tricky thing, Darren, is that any translation that any third party makes about others' comments, you need a chance to review them and check for accuracy, and this process doesn't give you much more time for that. I think that's the elegance of the Appendix 4 now, this collection of working group member comments.
So just to not to belabor the point, I thought that the list that Co-Chair Bray read, without kind of weighing in on the specifics of them or the merits of them or anything else, even just to have that list included in the appendix as items that we have discussed but haven't reached consensus on, I think has different weight than that being something that we submit as an individual member or we submit as a group of members. And that's all I was proposing, was that perhaps we could just have that list in with the draft legislation appendix.
So your suggestion is it's like sort of a co-chair's reflection on here are the ambiguities or the questions we're carrying forward. I don't know if you have time to do that, but it's a request coming back to you.
I can do it before I leave today.
Okay.
So we're working live. This is a live fire exercise here.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
The chairs of Senate and House committees.
So I would propose just writing a short paragraph, run it by the co-chair, and it will say that it will articulate what that appendix is about a little bit. Like there are other points of discussion that are raised in the appendices. Amongst them are included the following, something like that, or such as. So that it's not that we're endorsing them, we're just highlighting the fact that readers of the report should read the appendix because there's this sort of discussion going on in there. And I'll leave the bullets aloud in case anyone says you missed one. One size does not fit all. Net metering, impact of legislation on distribution utilities that are already at 100% renewable, ramping rates for any of the tiers that are altered, resource eligibility for tier 1A, including for DUs at 100%, resource eligibility for resources for tier 2. So those are the ones I heard people bringing up.
Chase.
Senator Bray, if I may, please, resource eligibility for tier 1 as well, please.
Okay.
just the same, no new wood biomass electricity generation across the board. All two please.
Great. You did say that? Sorry, I missed getting that down. Thank you.
It's a good list.
So what is your next step for, what do you need? We can agree on the list. We can agree on the list. I do feel I'm probably rushing this moment, and your public comment begins, it's scheduled to begin in a minute or so.
Okay.
What else do you need in order to vet the draft report while the working group is still together?
Should we understand Tuesday or Wednesday, we get something back, I'm assuming, and then what happens?
I don't know about the time frame. I need to check in with that, but the then what happens piece is important to clarify.
I've always thought of this, that the point of this working group was to inform the incoming legislature and help them hit the ground running on this topic. I feel like, although obviously this is a work in process, there's been a lot of good thinking that's gone on and is still going on, and thank you for commitment to keep working. And that we're going to facilitate better work by the incoming legislature. So we'll see a revised report, and there'll be a handoff, and we convene in 2 weeks.
So does my name go on the revised report even, I mean, how do we?
You're asking, are we voting today, or are we gonna get it?
Well, I think we started by saying we're not voting today, but
We
I'm
did?
just.
I don't think we
I
did.
don't think we did.
I think you probably have heard different signaling around that question.
Okay. Well, when I get a revised report that bears my name and I have a concern about something, or I'm just trying to understand, do we give you feedback by email? What's,
No.
that is not clear.
So here's where some source of confusion is. The stated agenda was calling for a vote. The very opening comments were saying that's not really what this conversation is going to be about because it won't serve the moment as well. So there might be some tension between what was advertised and what was said.
It was piece by piece by piece by piece by piece, as opposed to as a package.
So the tricky part about this is that draft report, I think you've seen the draft report. There's been some changes talked about that were just outlined. What level of approval do you need on that package before people adjourn?
I thought we were voting on the main report reflecting kind of what
I
we
think that
did.
goes to Christopher's question, that vote happens now?
Yes, I thought it happened now.
Okay.
And then if you,
It seems like the guts of it is in the appendix. So that's what I'm trying to understand.
I don't want to confuse this more, so just throw the suggestion out if it's a bad one. We have the ability to do votes by the internet, as we've done on some issues. We could put together a report and do it that way. It also leaves people the opportunity to file their own appendix comments, whether they vote yes or no. That seems to be a lot of available now.
What you don't have is the ability to take any edits and actually work with them as a group. In terms of what the product is, you actually have a draft in front of you that's pretty concrete. There are a couple elements of it that you've moved into Appendix 3. The draft working language has been retitled, and the discussion of that working draft language has been retitled. Those two pieces are now not in the report, but they're in an Appendix 3. And then Appendix 4 will include working group comments, things that you wanted, either new proposals that you've been thinking of that haven't been vetted by the group, but that's like your capstone to this process. So that would be where you get your own edits, but you wouldn't require a vote on them, and you wouldn't need to edit them by group. I think for the staff of this project, there isn't the capacity to take edits on that draft report other than what's happening right now. That would be the sections that just outline who's sitting on the group, when did you meet, where are the minutes found, what were the tasks, straw poll summaries that are in there. That's the extent of the draft report right now. Does that clarify? Co-chairs, do you need a vote then on that draft report as just outlined?
I mean, in part, people would be voting on the process from here to the finish line, which is, we have this, we know there's comments coming, we're going to include those, and then that whole package will get moved to the legislature.
Yeah, will be offered as a resource in the starting place going forward. So, yes.
So voting on the report. The appendices will continue to come in and reflect, just additional thoughts. And we're adding a paragraph from the co-chairs,
The beginning of
to
the
the beginning,
appendices.
also noting the commitment to keep working.
And clarifying the intent. Yep. I am pushing for a vote, I think, right now because of the time. Is that appropriate? Is that
Sure.
where you want to go?
Point of information,
Yep.
is my deletion on page 17 been accepted or not?
I have it noted as an edit that's getting made.
Yes.
Yes.
It's been accepted, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There are other small edits, like the cross-referencing, so that it doesn't refer to draft legislation that no longer exists, and just making sure that things line up. It's a working draft. Co-chairs, how would you like to call this vote?
Just to clarify, we're voting on the report without legislation in it as a reflection of the work that this group has done in the 8 meetings that we were allocated. Representative Scalia.
Madam Chair, I do want to note importantly that we have one utility that is not with us at this point. I don't know if we have any other representatives of the working group that are not here with us. And I do think it's important that every member of the working group vote. I'm not sure how you all would like to handle that.
Who is,
Rebecca.
Rebecca Town needed to step out. Anyone else? I didn't notice anyone else.
Anyone else not
leave.
here?
It's very hard to have people raise their hand when they're not here.
No, everyone else is here, but I could run through by names, and if there's a missing vote, you could reach out for that.
Senator Watson indicated that this actually.
Shane, have a phone now.
Senator
She has
Watson.
something.
There's somebody.
Would you like to do a roll vote?
Question is, can we leave it open for 2 people who are missing?
I would think that's usually chair discretion. We can leave a vote open or not.
I think,
So
does anyone object to us leaving it open for Senator Watson and VEC? Not saying any. Great.
So if you would call the roll,
Okay.
then people can vote on the proposal we just went through.
Okay, so you're voting yes or no? Is there an abstain option? Yes or no, up or down?
We don't, we've never had it.
Okay, so it's a yes or no. Yes or no, I have a member list here, and I'm gonna go in order of the member list. I don't know if there's a procedural order you usually go in. It's not, I don't even think it's alphabetical.
We usually vote last, Chair.
Okay. Senator Watson is not here right now. Representative Sibilia,
Yes.
Jeffrey Cram,
Yes.
William Driscoll,
Yes.
Michael Lozerchak. Sorry about your,
Volchak, Stowe Electric, no.
Shauna Lozo. She's on the phone. She is on the
She's on
phone.
the phone.
Yep, she's on the phone.
I can't unmute her, she's gotta do it herself.
Did she star, how does she do it? Someone.
It'll be *6 for you probably, Shauna. If you're able to do that, then let us know.
There you go.
Hi, can you hear me now?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, my vote is yes.
Thank you. Brian Evans Mungin,
Hyde Park votes no.
Candace? Yes. Ken? Sorry, Candace Morgan, Ken Nolan,
Yes.
Christopher Pearson,
Yes.
Louis Porter,
Yeah.
Brian Shoup,
Yes.
Darren Springer,
Yes.
Peter Sterling.
Yes.
Rebecca is not here. Ben Eggerly Walsh,
Yes.
Mia Watson. Yes. And Chase Whiting.
Yes.
Representative Christopher Bray.
Yes.
I mean Senator, sorry. I'm mixing them up. Senator Christopher Bray.
I used to be a representative, so I get it.
If you're voting for me, I'll vote for you.
Okay, that's
That's how we started.
right. I'm a team building exercise.
Sorry. Senator Christopher Bray, yes. And Representative Amy Sheldon.
Yes.
Thank you. That is the group.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
16 yeses, 2 noes, and 2 missing.
And then just to remind people, so we agreed for your contributions to the appendices. Appendix would be by close of business Monday, the 18th.
And Christopher, you asked a good question about when can you expect to see that written product back? I don't know. It will require some editing, and I think it needs to go through a series of review before it comes back to you. But you will get, I think we can commit to sending out a communication to all of you once it's ready. Okay, moving on to public comment then, I believe.
Okay. So first, let me just double, the room, is someone in the room here to make public comment? Mr. Crowley, Mr. Perry, and Smiley. Okay, so let's start with Ms. Smiley, then Mr. Perry, then Mr. Crowley, then we'll go to those who are online. And for those who are online, just so you know that I'm anticipating calling on you, I have Anna Geldert, Tom Perry's here, Ann Thompson, and Ashley Adams.
Do you have a time limit on constitutions?
I would ask people to try to aim for the 1 minute drill, and let's see how well we do there.
My name is Susan Smiley. I live in New Haven, Vermont, 350 Vermont too. Last meeting, you discussed the regional renewables, and in that process, members asked for a clear definition of renewables for that new 1A section. And the member from the Sierra Club, Chris Pearson, offered 2 phrases to be added, to be included in that effort for a clear definition. One was no new hydro that involved flooding of land, and the other was no new biomass. And those words were spoken here, and it was thrilling. I hope that, or I would think it'd be very important that those ideas and include those phrases, those concepts be part of any new revised definition of renewable resources that the legislature undertakes in 2024. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Perry and then Mr. Crowley.
Morning. My name is Tom Perry. I'm the technical director of the Zero Energy Now program, which is a statewide nonprofit whose focus is getting homes and small buildings off of fossil fuel. And we've developed very successful strategies combining weatherization, switching to heat pumps, and in some cases, biomass, pellet stoves, and pellet boilers or furnaces, and metered electric power generation, usually on site, but also sometimes community-based net metering. We've been very successful. We've achieved results on the order of fossil emissions reductions of 94% in the last couple of years, over 27 projects that were completed. We've been made aware recently of the broad economic concerns that utilities in particular have about net metering, the costs compared to other renewables, the fact that peak has moved into the evening hours, and also the cost shifting burden to ratepayers who don't happen to have solar generation and don't think they can afford to. Our program has shown that it is actually viable economically for lower income homeowners. And we ask that this group protect net metering as much as possible in its current form for the time being until we can kind of figure out, perhaps through another working group, the best strategy to alter it.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're now over 2 minutes.
Oh, well, that's pretty much it. I wanted to look you all in the eye and say thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Crowell.
Good morning. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for all the work you've done on all this over the last few months. So I'm Stephen Crowley. I'm here with the Vermont Community Solar Association. And I submitted some comments online already through the committee, so I hope that you'll take a look at those. I want to make a couple of quick points here this morning. One is regarding cost. I know that's a concern for many people, and it should be. I sat in as part of the stakeholder group of the department as they began this look at, costs, et cetera. And it's my understanding, and maybe I'd love to ask the Brattle Group this, but it's my understanding that when they looked at the costs, they specifically did not look at the savings that go with electrification. I think we all know that as we switch to heat pumps, for many people, we're going to be reducing our cost overall. An electric vehicle, over the lifetime of electric vehicle, you're going to save money. So that's not figured in. So when you look at the small incremental increase in electric costs of a few percent, really, over the lifetime that we're talking about, not for you, I'd be very interested. Am I already out of time?
You're at 1:17.
Oh, okay. All right. I will submit more later. Thank you. I think that's most important.
Thank you. Now I'm going to go to folks who are online. Anna Gildert. Morning.
Hi, morning. My name is Anna Gelder. I am a junior at Middlebury College, and I'm part of an environmental activist group on campus. And I would like to express my support for amending Vermont's renewable energy standard, and for the state's transition to 100% renewable energy, like wind and solar. From what I've learned, large-scale hydropower, like the energy that Vermont gets from Hydro-Quebec, is not truly green, as it releases a lot of methane into the atmosphere. This is something that I didn't know when I moved to Vermont, and it was quite surprising to learn this. Especially when I also learned that large hydro causes extensive environmental damage and is harmful to the indigenous communities whose lands have been flooded by these dams. That doesn't seem renewable to me. It was kind of shocking to learn. And I think the state of Vermont prides itself on leadership in environmental issues, and I firmly believe that amending the renewable energy standard and a full transition to ethical wind and solar energy sources are critical to live up to this standard that we've set for ourselves. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ann Thompson.
Good morning. Hello. My name is Ann Thompson, and I'm a sophomore student at Middlebury College. I'm also part of an environmental activist group here on campus. And I'm here today to voice my support for amending Vermont's renewable energy standard to exclude large-scale hydropower from Hydro-Quebec and incentivize in-state production of clean, affordable energy from wind and solar. While Vermont is often thought of as one of the most environmentally and socially progressive states, buying electricity from Hydro-Quebec is not an environmentally just practice, because large-scale hydropower emits methane, which is a potent greenhouse gas, and also has flooded indigenous lands. A reformed renewable energy standard that bans unbundled renewable energy credits and incentivizes the in-state production of renewables, wind and solar, would ensure a just and sustainable energy transition for all people. And I think that Vermont has a real opportunity to be a leader in the transition to renewable energy, which is happening whether this state chooses to set a good example or not. So yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And last this morning, Ashley Adams.
Hi there. I live in Burlington and I'm with Standing Trees and Stop Vermont Biomass. And I am just deeply disappointed that this body has completed its recommendations on long overdue updates to the RES while failing to reckon with Vermont's ongoing misguided support of our two biomass plants, McNeil and Reigate. This failure will inhibit our ability to achieve climate, biodiversity, and water quality goals, moving us backward on all three. It will also have material consequences for ratepayers who bear operational losses at McNeil, which are only partially mitigated by the unbundled REC scam. All of this in the name of subsidizing the Vermont and to an even greater extent, the New York forestry industry. Meanwhile, untold millions spent to keep these plants afloat could and should be put in service of supporting workers to transition out of it. In considering biomass renewable, this body continues to ignore settled science. Burning trees emits more carbon pollution than any fossil fuel, and unlike fossil fuels, eliminates the very trees that we desperately need to absorb and store carbon, making it the worst way to generate electricity. Forests are in fact not renewable in any meaningful sense. Unmanaged forest ecosystems provide vitally important, free, and irreplaceable services. Those of us with a deep love of Lake Champlain have witnessed its decline for decades and are keenly aware of the role that forests play in filtering our water and protecting our precious lakes and rivers, a function greatly diminished when our forests are disturbed by logging. Forests absorb and store carbon, clean our air, filter our water, mitigate floods, and support a biodiversity of life upon which all of life on Earth depends, humans included. Unmanaged forests that allowed to grow old perform all of these functions to a degree far exceeding young forests. Given the old forests in Vermont are rare to non-existent, we should be allowing many more forests to grow old rather than throwing them away to generate a few megawatts of power when we have so many other.
I'm really sorry. We are at beyond 2 minutes now and over time for our meeting. Thank you for your comment.
Okay. Right, and as always, for anyone, I know 1 minute is challenging to share everything that you would like to share. So always the committee is open to receiving written comments and they will go into our record and every committee member will have access to them. Before we adjourn, I just did want to thank everyone who's have some thanks before we say goodbye for now. And that is, there has been a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes to help organize the contractors, prepare our agendas, get the information out. So I'd like to thank Joyce Manchester and Julia Richter and Sorsha Anderson, who have done a tremendous amount of work to help let us work together. Our facilitator, Jen Nauer, thank you. And also our counsel, Ellen Chakowski, who's had the unenviable task of trying to write a bill after listening to all of us. I want to thank my co-chair and Representative Sibilia and Senator Watson, and then all of you. I've been on this beat for a while, 10 years, and this has been the most in-depth discussion I've heard of the renewable energy standard. So I just want to appreciate how much information people brought forward from share. I know we'll continue during the legislative session. I also really appreciate that although some of this has been difficult, the people have remained, your good natures have kept us all working along well together. So, and that's it. So thanks so much.
What he said. Thank you all. It's been very productive. I look forward to continuing to work with you all on this.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.